Okay, all right.
All right. Call the study session to order, and we'll do the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first I want to thank Dan King, the principal from Belfair, for being here for the study session as well. Ann Crosby had planned to join us, but she had a death in her family, so she was not able to be here this evening.
Send her our condolences, please.
I certainly will do that. So tonight when we have our regular board meeting, you will hear reports on our E2 and E3 academic competence and academic achievement policies, and we last updated them in 2016. But since we made that update, we've taken a look about how we're doing things in the district, and we've created our commitment to whole child, whole school, and whole community. And when we look at the whole child, separating out how we address the needs of students into academic competence, academic achievement, and even further, if we look at the rest of the E's, 3, 4, and 5, into behavior and engagement and the other items that we address in those separate policies, we're looking at the children in bits and pieces, and we're not addressing that all of the pieces of the student, the behavior, the social emotional, and the academic have to happen together for kids to be able to learn in our school environments. So as we've been doing the work to take a more comprehensive approach to educating our students across the district with our implementation of MTSS and our evaluation of what's working and what needs improvement, conversation arose among the leadership team that, you know, are these the right things to be measuring ourselves on for student success? And so Dan and I particularly, and Ann with previous input, took a look at some other districts and how they talk about these things. And we looked at districts both that have policy governance like we do, and others that use the more traditional 2000s for student areas of, you know, academic reporting and those kinds of things. And then we came up with a draft, and we looked at places that particularly were helpful to us to look at, and then Dan, jump in whenever you want, that were particularly helpful. We looked at Manson's, we looked at Bellingham, and we looked at Bainbridge Island. All had really good language that tried to describe where we were trying to go. We also took a look at the statements about what a college and career ready graduate, what attributes they should have that are part of our Washington State Learning Standards and Common Core standards. And we looked at the standards that come from the social and emotional learning that come from the National Association on School Counseling. And we tried to embed all of those into the document that you see as, instead of E2 academic competence, and certainly all the words in these documents are open for discussion, we rewrote it as E2 student success and made a 3-part rather than academic competence in one and behavior in another. We made a 3-part description of what our students would be able to do. So like we found in some of the other policies, particularly Manson and Bellingham. So we have 2A that deals with academic achievement. We have 2B that talks about personal skills development that we might expect our graduates to have completed. And then 2C, social skills development. So I'd like you guys to kind of take a minute and read through those, and we can start with your responses to this draft, because this is our initial draft and some work that we put together.
Right, I have a question or two or whatever, just for clarification for my sake mostly. These were the policies, if I remember right, that we worked on in study session when I was board president. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so as an overview, this is for my sake, whatever you guys take out of it is for you, is, you know, great. But from why we did that then, because that was significant changes then from what we had set up when we first did policy governance, and was very much at that point aligned with state and federal type of measurements. And my goal in us doing that back in 2016 was to get that conversation and that whole process out of the testing thing, out of the focusing on we're going to fail or succeed based on those outside factors which we really don't have good control over. And so I was really pleased about that, because as a board we all agreed this. As I've read through this, I'm even more pleased, this is again philosophically, because it's coming from you folks. And that's where it ought to come from. And that doesn't mean this is the end or you know, haven't parsed it more than to look at it once really good. But as an overview, I just wanted to give you, and I guess Dan also you, that I'm really glad that it's now coming from you, the staff, who are the ones that work with the kids directly. So it's more driven by the people that where it counts. I still want to examine it more deeply. But anyway, I wanted to give that overview to make sure that I was on the right page about where this came from. Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And just quickly, we think that this continues where we were headed as a board 2 years ago. We also worked to look for descriptors that are things that we can measure,
Right.
because we need to be able to provide you with a report on how we're doing in these areas.
Right, we'll be able to look at that better closely. I was trying to get us away from that we have to meet these state test scores and stuff like that and measure it against everyone else. And that was, to me, the absolutely wrong way to go. And our board at that point agreed with that. And this is going farther and getting down to where, as I look at it real briefly, we can actually measure it against ourselves. There's still a little bit of language I saw in there that I wasn't happy with, but I haven't really parsed it all that carefully, just had one good look at it. But anyway, so thanks. Again, that's just an overview. That's what I got my head on straight. Thank you.
So I guess my observation here is we're going to meld together academic achievement and competence into an ends policy addressing student success. So as we do this, and Dan, you could probably answer this too, are these measurable outcomes that are reasonably measured? Or will it take, I see some of these are obviously observational assessments. So how does this translate into a student's report card, for instance? That parents will see that this is what these students are actually getting toward.
Okay, good question. Are these measurable? I think almost all of these are measurable. Some of these we might need to think about how we will measure those, and maybe really kind of specify what measures how will we know? For example, if students are responsible and safe in the digital world. That's one we added on there because it felt so important with social skills development in this day and age. So how do we measure that? That's a good question. One way might be that we're seeing fewer instances where we have office disciplinary referrals or issues at the high school level, maybe in particular at the middle school as well, where students are being reported for using technology in a harmful way, like cyberbullying. So if we had a way to track instances of cyberbullying and seeing that that is diminishing as we put supports in place for students, that would be one way to measure. So I think if we looked at every single one of these bullets, we could realize that yes, there is a way to measure this. Are we measuring it now? Some we are, some maybe not. Could we measure them? Probably so.
I think one really good example that's just kind of a tool we're just getting our feet wet with as far as the social, emotional, and the personal skills part is the SABRS screening tool that we're using now with that our schools are just finishing their first application of. And it is a tool that at the younger grades, the teachers fill out for each of their kids. At the higher grades, kids also fill out a version. And all it does is gives us what's our risk level for a specific student or a specific group of students or a specific class. For example, we're not done with all of our students right now, but we know that of the students we've assessed so far, about 74% are in the low risk category. So now we know more details about those kids who aren't in low risk and what we can do better at school to support their needs to develop some of these skills, like being able to look at what's going on in my personal life and establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships, or demonstrate that self-awareness to know that I'm going to respond this way in a situation, so I should think of a different way to do this in case next time, when I get upset, I can make a choice that will be more successful for me. So these are all things that we're working on teaching our kids, so we are going to have ways to measure those, but they will be different ways. And some of those might include surveys. What do students think about some of these things? Are they doing that? Do they have opportunities when we look at personal skills development? What kind of opportunities are they having to pursue their own interests in music and art, in leadership or sports? What are we providing? Where would they like to see more?
I really like that. I like the student survey piece of that. And back to my concern is this is all an expectation that we will now have for our students once we pass this or adopt this new revision, how does this information get to the parents? Not only they are successful in these areas, your student is really on target, really, meeting all of these expectations. How do the parents know? How will they know? Because obviously we're not going, this doesn't factor into our report cards. So how will they
Can I-
know, and how do we get that to
Can I
them?
piggyback off that question? And it's more of, and as a parent, I guess I'd like to know that same thing is maybe tying a curriculum piece
Mhm.
to these portions, because that gives that more objective, measurable attribute. For instance, I have a tough time with policies that the words don't mean anything or are vague. And like, for instance, the ends policy 2C, social skills development, which I think in a great, perfect world, these are all great, but be highly skilled, a flexible thinker, and an effective team member. What does that mean? I mean,
Yeah.
my view of effective might be completely different than someone else's. Highly skilled versus, well, what's wrong with just being skilled?
Yeah, and in one draft, I took that sentence completely off because I felt it was too subjective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more comfortable with be responsible and safe in a digital world because we can define responsible and then we can measure it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that's just,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that goes back to Laura saying measurable. And we all have different measures of, and words have meaning, And so, sorry, go ahead, Laura, if you
Well,
finish.
I just want to make sure that we're not creating something that we can't administer and track. And obviously, we don't need more things in the classroom for the teacher to be tracking with her checklist here. Did this
Right.
one meet this and this and this? These soft skills at the end, which I call soft skills, are the social skills and the personal skills. Those are all observations. And when you're observing in the high school, for instance, 30 students in your classroom, are you expected to record or to document that there are kids that are not meeting these? How does this translate into an effective instrument for information, not only for the student, but their parents and also the system? That's my question.
And I think that's a really good question, and that is particularly 2C. Many of those are those kinds of skills that we are evaluating and having students self-evaluate using the SAVERS tool.
Okay.
So we have, and that information will be shared with the parents, I think, right, Ben? You guys just did that? They just finished their first, well, they haven't even finished in most buildings, their
we're
first
not
use
done.
of the tool. And teachers are still learning how to use it. Kids that are old enough have asked themselves the questions about themselves for the first time. So that kind of information is how we would respond to this. Some of these
That's-
also, when we look at the one on personal skills about work and finance and performance, that's now a state requirement for us. And one of the things we're looking at is how are we gonna make sure we do that, that work with our kids? Are we going to have, like, some schools do, student and family night where you come in and you get a checkbook and we give you a fake job and you have to go have to go sign up for a house and you have to do a budget. There are different ways that we'll have to do some of those things. And some of them are, if we decide these are the right important things, some or all of them or different ones, because certainly you can make any changes to this document that you want, then we would take it back to our admin team, and they looked at it today as well, and say, okay, what really do we have to measure this, or what can we envision having to measure this, and we would bring that back to you, because we're not expecting to take action on this at this study session
Right.
tonight, but really have a first look at what we might do differently that helps us, guide us to more effectively address the whole kid instead of just parts of them.
So the 2A, the high academic achievement, every one of those items under that area, those are from the Common Core standards for English language arts and mathematics. So
And our current state standards.
And their
Yeah,
current
right.
state standards, and they're the college and career readiness standards that really are the framework for all of the Common Core standards from kindergarten through 12th grade. So that's really what the essence of the Common Core standards is all about, is getting students ready for college and or career. And these really provide the structure and framework for that. So they are measurable, and they really are what we're working at. All of our Common Core aligned curriculum should be working towards these ends. The social skills development, as Dana said, the SABRs can help us gather data and determine and measure our success towards these. But not all of them. Some other ones, like the being responsible and safe in a digital world. In the elementary level, there's a 5th grade component to our Second Step program. So SABRs wouldn't really get at that, but there are other things that we're using, like Second Step. But that's not something that would go all the way down to kindergarten. So some of these would be measured at different grade levels in different ways, or maybe it doesn't apply to certain grade levels.
Right.
But our Second Step curriculum touches on a lot of these that are under 2C. I can't really speak to secondary and what's happening at that level to address these areas, but we do
But
have.
it might be that some of those we hit the hardest at younger stages,
Mhm.
and then we readdress as kids get older. You know, in our existing set of standards in this area that we report on, we are pretty skewed at the secondary level. But there are things we need to be talking about K, 5, 6, 8 that would support that ultimate graduate at the secondary level.
Mhm.
So I think talking about Second Step is one really good way to do that. And then we have some other things we can look at in the high school.
And
Well-
these could also be presented in our student handbooks as a way to communicate with families that
Mhm.
these are areas that we value and are
Mhm.
important
Mhm.
learnings for students.
That would be great. And again, I mean, I read this before I came here, and obviously a lot of thought and work and conversation went into the development of these 3 Ns policies, and I appreciate all of that the admin team has done. And they do address all of the areas in my mind that we really should be looking at to help students develop and become successful in high school. But back to the measurement piece, I just didn't know how that would happen and how you fold in the whole parent education part of it, because it will be an educational experience for parents as well.
Yes.
And they may not agree. I mean, they may
Right.
think that their students are responsible and safe in the digital world, for instance,
Mhm.
not realizing that maybe they're not. But just knowing that that's an expectation would be, hopefully they would partner with us then to monitor how that looks for every age level. Because even
Absolutely.
little guys now have those
Absolutely.
digital devices. So my question, or just for you to relate back to the admin team, is that my concern is that this will create a greater burden on the administrators and the teachers in terms of measuring the progress on the soft skills.
Okay. I will do that. That's good input.
I had some questions that I want to build off on what Laura said in both categories. Obviously, a great deal of thought has gone into this. It shows, and I greatly appreciate that. And I'm sort of acting as a friendly advocate. So the thing you'll be accused of is touchy-feely. That's the thing that you're up against. And so in that regard, I just want to go down the list quickly and point out a few things, and we can discuss them as needed. So just starting at the top, I think build strong content knowledge. That's fine. Content is whatever the state requirements are, and that sort of thing gets along fine. And I really appreciate you're doing the second one, so important, because this is the essence of the rhetorical discipline. And I would just make this observation. adapt their communication in relationship to audience, occasion, task, and purpose.
Or occasion?
Yeah, that's always put in,
What did I miss?
occasion.
Oh, okay.
Because then our knowledge is, when we give a presentation, our knowledge is addressed to somebody on some occasion.
Yes.
So Campbell's first law, no formula for public speaking won't serve equally well as a recipe for disaster in some other situation. So I just look at the suggestion, I just can't figure the discipline in, and I think it would be covered by occasion, which is the thing that is always, spoken of. And that's central to humanities, because that's humanistic learning, because presenting a message to an audience can never be a science. And so it requires you to demonstrate some practical skills of reasoning, even in presenting more expert material. So, okay, I think that would, people want to know, what's discipline there? Sounds like it's thrown in. Not that I'm completely.
No, and if I can, where that came from in the standards was, you write differently if you're writing a science report or a science experimental report, as if
I would
writing
put
a
it,
short story.
sure, I would put it as the first, adapt their communication in relationship to discipline, audience, occasion, task, and purpose.
Okay.
So that way you can keep it and it's right there.
That's good. Yes.
Can that word discipline be modified slightly? 'Cause
Sure.
there's
Why not?
Two versions of what
It's our
discipline
policy.
means. Discipline means get in line, as
Oh.
opposed to discipline means subject.
Yeah, and that might be a smarter thing to do anyway, because discipline's kind of an education-ese word.
Right.
Yeah.
Subject?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can say sub-discipline, almost defines it better.
Okay.
Well, I would think,
Well, the
Yeah.
whole thing is putting it to the audience, task, purpose, and discipline, and then if you're writing it for an audience of, say, everybody, so all the parents are reading it, then maybe.
They might read discipline
as something.
behavior rather
Yes.
than what content area you're
Right.
studying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would just praise the rest of these things in your first section, and I think particularly I greatly applaud, use evidence to construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Look at a whole lot of education. It looks like this was put in by somebody I paid. Anyway, okay, personal development skills. How would you quantify, demonstrate independence?
Okay, so that would be one of the things, like, we looked at some of the projects we looked at, the independent projects that we talked about
Oh.
with different school districts
Okay.
this last week. That could look like, if we give every student an opportunity to choose something about which they're passionate to study and present their learning on, then those presentations
Yeah.
would be our demonstration of student independence. We would be able to say, at X and X and X grade levels, students
Yeah, right.
give these, 80% of students gave presentations that were found to be
Sure.
adequate, exceptional, whatever measure we decide for those.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
That might be one way.
Yeah, my observation on it would be, it's a touchy-feely person of interest. So I would just make it uninteresting to our critics, by building, well, what were we talking about?
Demonstrating
demonstrating independence.
Oh, yeah, demonstrating independence. You could include something substantive in that. Demonstrate independent problem-solving skills.
I see what you
And
mean.
there's nothing
Mhm.
touchy-feely about that.
Yes.
And it also includes demonstrate. I really like the, now, I have a question about the next one. Experience personal pursuits such as music, art, drama, sports, leadership, and others. Since when did music and art become personal pursuits rather than academic studies? And it seems to me those are humanistic disciplines,
Mhm.
and they deserve to be regarded as part of one's liberal education.
Okay?
Okay?
We Dan and I
We
were
could
talking
steal
about where
that one
that,
from another district, but we were talking about.
we were talking about
Yeah,
where
well,
it
look at-
fits best, is
It
really.
is
doesn't
an
it?
elective, however.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It
know.
is an elective, so you're not required
We're
to
always
participate
getting
in music,
cut.
art, drama.
Music and
I
speech
know,
and the
I
rest
know.
of it.
But
we're
even
always-
as an elective, it's still an academic course.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
but I'm saying it is a personal pursuit. For instance, you're not gonna go play the violin.
Look at experience music.
Maybe not.
I don't have to be able to play a note.
But I think, I like it the way it's worded. I think it leaves room for everyone to interpret it to
Okay.
their personal advantage.
It could be that mine's the wrong standard. I'm always looking for some agenda that's gonna cut communication.
What about,
You know.
instead of pursuits, interests?
Anything that,
No, I like
language
pursuits.
that makes it central, they tried to get rid of our department, because, University of Washington, because it wasn't central to liberal education. That puts me out full force,
Okay.
ready to do battle.
Sounds like that one can be just sort of fixed with changes of words.
But yeah, that's right, and besides, look at, you're right in this case, Dana. I'm definitely applying standards from somewhere else.
Yes.
And if this doesn't fit that, then,
Dan and I discussed this, and we were thinking it could fit in either 2A or 2B, and the reason why we put it in 2B is because some of these pursuits occur inside and outside the school setting.
That's right.
And for example, we might have students who take private music lessons and don't take any music,
In school.
instrumental music at school at all.
Mhm.
And so, but it
Same
is
thing with
but
ballet.
it does develop their personal, it's good for their personal
yeah,
development.
I leave it to you
So-
guys to play with that.
Something could be in both sections too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
part of my
Maybe.
teaching experience is this, the people in the music department came over and took my seminar in rhetoric, and we
Mhm.
had a great fruitful interchange.
Mhm.
Handel's Messiah is an oratorio. Where did music get its first vocabulary? From rhetoric. And, right down to musical,
Yes.
musical schemes, right down to, so
Right.
it's really, that's my concern.
Okay.
And you can see where I come
Mhm.
from
Absolutely.
on it.
Absolutely.
So you guys, I
Mhm.
not gonna,
That's good feedback.
It is really
I-
good.
I
Yeah.
li- Yeah, it's a,
okay, I want to just finish a couple other things. Come to understand other perspectives and cultures. How can our kids realistically be expected to understand other cultures?
That's actually part of our requirement in our social studies
Really?
standards and curriculum.
What
Yes.
constitutes that?
There are a lot of things that when we adopt curriculum, for example, we specifically look for culturally responsive curriculum
Okay?
that not only does not perpetuate biases, but also exposes our students to things that they might not experience
Okay,
at home or in
that's
our
fine.
community.
If you guys know what you're doing, it's fine for me.
Okay.
And that was out of the college and career readiness
Okay.
standards as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm saying, okay, share negotiations, okay, that looks okay. Constructive choices, decisions in and, what constitutes decisions in and for groups?
what are you looking at?
I'm
So-
looking at 2C, ends,
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
What's
and-
that mean?
Oh,
That also came out of the college and career standards, and
Oh, okay.
what that's about, no, but let's
Yeah.
explain it, because we can include more language, we tried to make it succinct,
Yeah.
but we might have made it so succinct that it doesn't make sense. And so, what that means is, can they participate in a group to solve a problem, because that's
Mhm.
what many people will have to do at
Yeah.
work, or can they make a decision that will be to the benefit of a group that they're a
Yeah.
part of, or that they need to, as they grow up and become adults, that they need to make a decision for, like a teacher makes for a classroom, a principal makes for a building, a lieutenant makes for the department. Those kinds of, have we given them experiences about how to make that kind of a decision in a way that is to the benefit of the people involved?
Right, and they can be measured fairly
Yes,
coherently. I'm thinking just on a scholarship that, well, Don LaPere, who was in on that one with me, we gave actually a Gertech Award to a kid who actually came back to us and described how he had learned how to work with other people, how to be in charge now that he's at the shipyard, and he had to be in charge of the group. He talked to us about that as part of the interview for this scholarship award, the Gordy Montan Award.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually got some of it from Builders Club.
Hey, all right.
Which he was able to articulate, and saying how, because he had been president of the Builders Club, he had had experiences directing people. He was actually really good at understanding that, but being able to bring it back to us verbally. And yet here's a kid that's going into welding and auto repair and stuff like that, and is that articulate.
Yeah.
That's measurable, though.
Yeah, well, that's great. Look, again, I say, friends, I'm just a product of academic wars, and I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of a dean
Yes.
wanting to cut something,
Yeah.
okay? So, okay, make decisions in and for groups. What's demonstrate self-awareness?
Okay, so I can speak from the elementary level, especially around our social-emotional curriculum. We are working at helping students self-regulate and be aware of themselves in a group setting or among others. For example, we're teaching them how to have empathy towards others. We're teaching them to monitor their own behavior and how others perceive them, to recognize whether they're feeling frustrated or angry or upset, and teaching them some skills so
This
that they
makes
can
sense,
deal with
everything you
that.
say makes sense, but it adds something. It isn't just self-awareness, it's self-awareness in some activity.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there was some specificity to the end,
So in social settings or something like that.
whatever you want to put there, and that sort of satisfies my
Self-awareness when in groups or.
self-awareness.
We
It
can
satisfies
work
my,
on that.
satisfies
In
my
settings
self-awareness as
and-
one of the
Or even
vulnerable.
personally.
In, yeah,
Social situations or something like that.
and, yeah, that was
Yeah.
one where the document we were looking at, the description was so long, we cut it as short as possible.
Yeah.
So we do need to give more details there, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, that's basically it for me, and my suspicion is that self-awareness and the decision in and for groups possibly could be combined some way in one, but that's just an assumption, a suspicion. So, I've said my piece. I appreciate your response.
You were almost to the next one.
Thank
I
you,
just,
John.
and I don't have a problem with this really, but establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. How are they gonna be
Yeah,
graded on
That's a
that?
good
You know,
point.
like, cause I know there's, I guess nowadays, few students that are so quiet that they don't really have a clique. You know, they really don't have a group. I wasn't one that had a clique, I guess, and maybe I would be considered as somebody that was not in a diverse group, I guess, or friends with those people. I was friendly, but I was definitely afraid half the time in a lot of different settings. So how would that be measured, I guess? And what if a child doesn't demonstrate the way that maybe most kids do? Then how would you find out if they have a problem? Or is it just, do they have to do it in school? Or maybe they have a totally different lifestyle where they have a friend group at home or at church.
Right.
They go have friends at church, but they're not real friendly with people at school. So
And part of how we might measure that is looking at how giving kids the opportunity and helping them grow when they work in those groups to do, whether it's cooperative learning activities or to do some group problem solving. Some kids in the old days, when I was growing up, tended to only want to work with these 4 kids all the time and would resist the teacher saying, you know, I want you to try working with some different kids and see how you can, how as a team you can get some different ideas and that kind of thing. So what we might do to demonstrate that we could then evaluate is how adaptable are they to working with different kinds of people to do different things.
It is also true in the social science circles that kids, adults too, but when you do things with other people, that is the best way to get to people to expand their horizons about working with diverse people and stuff like that. If you do something with somebody, you have a shared memory, even if you didn't like the person. But by doing it, whether you hate it, and I hated being in groups at school, by the way, still when you do it with them, and you're forced to do stuff with them, you come out of it with, well, shared memories. There can be good ones, bad ones, but by doing it, you've got something that you've gained something. You've expanded some horizon at that point. And the more you do that, the better it is. The more broad the kids get. So we still have to figure out how to measure that, but still, I know from, well, boy, my job, but also just in social science circles, when people do things with others, that's where the rubber meets the road.
I think that's very good, and I also want to commend yourself and anybody else on this, their understanding of citizenship. That was probably strategically put into Buy-Off Campbell, and I want to tell you it worked.
Well, I'll tell you, it is a major focus of ours. And we're already, at the elementary level, our report card has, we're giving grades or standards-based grades, a 1, 2, 3, or 4, whether students are meeting the standard in math, science, English language arts, and those major disciplines. But we're giving a different kind of grade, if you will, or mark on the report card for more of these lifelong learning skills, which include cooperativeness and things like that. So we're already doing that, but we're marking satisfactory, needs improvement, or exemplary. So we're already doing that. So in that sense, the student is kind of getting a grade, but maybe not all of these is that we're giving the student a grade on. It's just that we are gauging and measuring and collecting data on this, for example, using our SABRES tool to kind of evaluate how the social emotional wellness of our students. So that's not a grade we're giving students, but it is data we're collecting so that we can see if our programs are working.
Well, I just want to commend Art for teaching me something this evening. Not that this is the first time or I'm all that surprised, but I like his way of describing common memory. Actually, the whole thing on citizenship with me is instilling the right memories so that you're an American whether you know it or not. You feel something of the Star-Spangled Banner, and by using things, by going in different tasks, Robert's Rules of Order, doing things in an ordered way, that tells you most of the story right there. I would rather they knew something about the specific benchmarks of the history. Just teaching patriotic myths well would be something I would satisfy for. But the substantive aspect of that is common memories. That's exactly the point. To build common memories is how we become one people. And of course, then sharing the memories of other people that come into that, the e pluribus unum, there's the one and the many. And I think they both play together, and they play together substantively, as Art mentioned.
The very last sentence in the opening is crossed out. Do we mean to leave that in as the board establishes the following standards by which student success is to be measured?
Yeah, we meant to
Okay.
leave that in. Thank you.
Spencer, do you have anything to add?
Not particularly. I just think it was a good point. Whoever made it, I think it's interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see how we can administer some of these, because I think it'd be hard to do, especially at the high school level where you're not in a class with a teacher all day, and you only got 60 minutes to teach so many things. So I think it'll be interesting to see how we can do that.
And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that because I would not have thought of that on my own. When we just talked about the I know at the grade school level, you know, their citizenship or how they,
Yes.
their, you know, meets expectations, needs improvement and stuff like that. And that's where I go back to the problem of, well, my second period teacher thinks I'm doing fantastic, loves my personality. Fourth period, we don't see eye to eye. So now I have a exceeds versus a needs improvement. And so now we just blew the top on our subjectivity. And any area of evaluation, when you're overly subjective, it makes the evaluation meaningless, in my opinion. I would challenge you guys. I mean, 2A I like. 2B I could probably live with. 2C I can't. I really would challenge you guys to go back, maybe tear it apart and build it back up, because it's just, to me, I think any way you say, well, we can demonstrate this way, I could show you a way that, well, that's, you're saying it and somebody else would say it completely wrong. And I look at it as well as being, what's the next board going to measure that? You know, and so that's my tough part with 2C, and I love the work that's gone on it, and I love the feeling of it. I really do. But at the end of the day, when you're giving your report, I say, yeah, well, man, she hit the nail on the head. And Art's over here hit me over the back of the head going, are you crazy? And so I mean, I don't
That's
know.
the essence of subjective
Exactly.
assessment. And I think these are all good. I like the social skills that you have listed here.
don't
But
think so.
again, if there isn't a common way to measure them through a common filter, which is what you just talked
Right.
about, that's going to make it difficult for the student. At the elementary level, not so much, because that kid is with the same teacher all day long. And social skills, to me, are basic civility. And if it can be boiled down to that, do they treat one another in a civil manner? Can they discuss and debate and converse
Respectfully,
in a
yeah.
civil manner? All of these things create that civility. I don't personally agree that you should throw the whole thing out, but I do think.
I didn't say the whole thing. I just said I don't like 2C.
Well,
You
that's,
wanna
that's
see
the
it.
whole thing of 2C.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to see?
Yeah,
if
but
you-
Yeah.
I think if you find a way, a common filter, a common measurement for this,
Okay.
I think they're good. And I like every bullet under 2C. And again, I say that it just speaks to being a civil.
And the other
Well,
challenge on
individual.
that too is I think we've worked really hard to give you a very broad box to work out of.
Yes.
And this really closes the box, in my opinion.
Okay.
I really think, because it can get so easy. Once again, I don't know what the next board looks like. It can get really easy to start nitpicking on these sort of things. And then all of a sudden that our parameters of which you operate get narrow and narrower and narrower, can't say that word, to the point of, man, the board's making a lot of
Yeah, I'm
is-
sorry we got fruit flies in
Yeah, it
the building
happens.
this week.
so the board is having more
Fighting
operational
there.
input
Yeah.
than I think it is, and that's
Okay.
slippery slope, you know. And that's
Those are really, all of those are really good comments, and we can take those back and work with those, and.
Yeah,
Just-
I would say that this is the most vulnerable and the most, it's most inviting for pulling things together. For example, the second one, constructive choices, et cetera, establish and maintain healthy, rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. Seem to be those two are related. And so is the self-awareness one. Of course, you guys gave a defense. To the extent that these things relate to some way of talking that relates to some audience that you gotta satisfy, then I'll pull back. But I'm just talking about a general reader with a specific background.
Okay.
Well, and I believe that it's important for families, parents, or guardians to understand that these social skills that you've described here, the expectation is that our students will have these social skills, and maybe they're more directed at a secondary student than an elementary, and the personal skills development builds to the social skills. I don't know. But I don't think that we should take them out altogether. I'd like to see them in there. I don't want to put you in a box, however. He did have a really good point there, because I'm thinking about now a monitoring report
Mhm.
and what that would look like, and how extremely difficult it would be to
Well-
gather this data and.
Yeah, and we'll take a look and bring you back another draft. It might be that we condense that list and look at some things that are more measurable and more simple. For example, I think the first bullet is one that's very easy to measure.
Mhm.
And although that can be social skills, that can also be academic skills. That language did come from the state standards document, so it is.
But those are,
Yeah.
I think, fairly, any reasonable person could say that's an objective standard. That's an objective, measurable outcome. You know, and I had made a little note here to myself. One thing that I don't see in any of this is an ability, you know, critical thinking. Demonstrate, you know, I think it goes right in there with independence, critical thinking, something our society seems to be lacking anymore. But, and I would caution on, you know, and I know we talk a lot about it, and I love data as much as the next person, but we can't get lost in it because at the end, that bullet point represents a person, you know, and at the end of the day.
So I'm inclined to agree a whole lot with what Craig says, except for when I have to beat him on the back of the head. For when, but anyway.
That's why you sit there.
Something that, there's, whatever these things turn out to be and whatever we wind up approving down the road and stuff, I can see particularly for those social skills development types of things, there's a lot of work that you would have to do, you and the teachers have to do to help this happen. And that I can see means some big changes and some real
Well,
collaboration,
I think they're
particularly on the
doing it.
high school level, for making these things happen, such as what we saw happening at Manson.
Right.
Well,
And I do think that they're doing that, they're just not following a list. I think they
Mhm.
are consciously developing these skills in their students. They're not documenting it,
well,
not
and I
reporting
think
it.
in developing this initial stab at this,
Mhm.
what we're looking at doing is how do we define the changes we're actually trying to make and what we're actually
Mhm.
trying to do in addressing the needs of the whole child. And if we implement a program like we saw at Manson, it would fit into many of these things
Mhm.
as a way to measure, are we doing some of this?
Mhm.
And as a way to give our kids some independence and the ability to demonstrate that they're ready for the real world. And it also ties in with, you have the document that I think I shared with you briefly, that the district MTSS team created a draft last week that we hope that these things reflect each other, are
They
reflective
do,
of each other.
yeah.
And this is the work that team is doing around, if we need to describe to people what we're doing in our multi-tiered systems of support, we're doing them because as a district we believe these statements and we promise to deliver on these statements for our kids. And that's hopefully connected to whatever we end up with in these end results, changes that we might look at.
Do you have 100% buy-in on these core beliefs?
This is from this is a draft from the MTSS team to begin with. You know, as we talk about this, and we talked about this in our leadership team today, and this is the first time that we really got a chance outside of the MTSS core team to discuss it. You know, if we end up agreeing as the leadership team, which includes teacher leaders, that these are what we believe in the district, then these statements become how we select our new employees. That
yeah.
if we
Good
don't
point.
believe these things, then maybe this isn't the best place to be once we have, you know, agreed that whatever list, if this one changes, is our true belief system as what education means in North Mason, then this becomes the definition of what our buildings should provide to our kids and our families.
I would go even further, Laura, if there's 100% buy-in. Do we 100% buy-in as a board? Because I
Well,
believe,
that's kind of why I'm bringing it to you,
Yeah.
because if you don't like some things on here, I want to bring this back to the team.
because this, I mean, and I was going to make a comment from in the normal regular meeting with regards to the conferences. You know, I had that one breakout session I went to with regards to trauma-sensitive schools
Mhm.
and the
Yes.
ACEs and all that stuff. And MTSS was a big part of that, and that was one of the things is, you know, are your custodians taking part in this, because your bus drivers taking, and I was thinking, why are we not taking part in these things? I mean, if I'm a random employee of the school district and I'm taking these, but I see I don't see the top people doing it, well, don't come down on me for not having buy-in. Where are you guys at? And that's another thing I would challenge us as a group to make sure that we have 100% buy-in on this as well, because nothing says, the one thing we do control, I think very, very much so, is the budget. And you show me someone's budget and I'll show you their values.
And so part of the reason for bringing you the draft core belief document today is, what does the board think about this document?
Oh, you have 100% of my buy-in on this document. I'm not going to wordsmith it. I think it's great. And I do believe this. I think that these are the commitments and beliefs that we should have in this school district, particularly the one where we promise every student will be provided effective, explicit, systematic, and relentless, I love that
Relentless,
word,
yeah.
Instruction with a research-based core curriculum.
Well, it seems all those bullet points under the commitments for implementation, those can be measured. There doesn't leave a whole lot of fluff in there that can be debated.
Yeah.
The one question I had too, this was a merging of E3 into E2, right? Correction. So one thing though that I think me personally would have a tough time with eliminating is I never liked the graduate career and college ready, because once again, what does that mean? But students will have the opportunity to earn college level credits. I think having that somewhere in there is really good. Number 4, all students will be challenged with academically rigorous experiences and coursework. And I don't know if that goes back to a subjective term, but it's something, something that's challenging. Whether you're talking about the highly capable people or the folks who have an IAP or whatever, but they're being academically challenged to their level. I think that's important as still a value of ours.
And that would go under 2A.
Yeah, I believe so. And then the other part is the supports are available to ensure academic success for all students, and that goes back to, because a lot of this is what the students are gonna do. What's this district going to do to ensure that sort of thing? So I'm all about making things
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
exactly.
Okay.
So, and I'm not married to all 3 of those, but at the very least, the academically rigorous experiences and coursework, I think.
Okay. I've got really neat and tidy notes about everything that you
It's
said.
better than mine.
You can look at that.
Back to the core beliefs, Craig, do you think this is something that should be on the agenda for us to adopt?
Tonight?
Well,
Or at
maybe
some
not
point.
tonight.
I would like to take back your support to it, to the committee, and so that they know that you like it this way.
is there anything anybody would like to
or
change in it
if
or
you have
doesn't like
things
or
you'd
wants to
like them
discuss?
consider.
I would just say as a block, 2C is the weakest one of all.
We're talking about the core beliefs
No,
here.
we're talking about this one.
These ones.
Oh, okay.
These.
jumped
Oh, well, goodness. Hello.
So a thought that I have, which may or may not fit in here, but maybe it fits in the other one, is it's really being a specific thing. I would love to see every kid to have, if it's not a mentor, but somebody, a staff person of some sort, who's looking out for that kid. Every kid has somebody.
That goes back to that trauma-sensitive schools. Was there was a comment made that
And I don't know
One
what
of
you
the-
call that, but Manson does that
having
too, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
a strong adult,
Mentor.
a consistent, reliable adult.
Advocate.
An advocate,
If
right?
advocate, but also,
Someone that actually seeks them out.
Right.
Not to wait for them to come,
right.
but to go.
And I
just
think a
to-
statement like that would fit really well under the promises section.
They even have that at the shipyard. When you go to the shipyard, you don't,
The
you can
mentor?
opt out, but you get a mentor, and you can go through the mentor. I was one of the leaders in the mentor group, and it was a really great program. Not everybody took advantage of it, which the people that did were very successful, and people that didn't, some were successful, but you could see the ones that fell, they were offered many times a mentor, and especially when they were falling, that mentor was offered to them, and some took it and some didn't. I wanted to make a comment about 2C. we talk about the parents, and we talk about us, and we talk about teachers and the staff knowing, you know, where the student is, but the student knowing where they are. So getting something at the end of school, before the end of school, really going out there. So when I was in high school, I never got these kind of things at the end of high school. Like, I thought a lot about, I didn't think a lot about it myself, like I was stuck up or anything, but I had some ideas, like when I was going out there, that I thought were right. But maybe if somebody would have evaluated what those thoughts were in this exact one. And yes, some of them, even if you, instead of making them shorter, maybe making them bigger, because it explains it more. So after you explained the short ones, they were a little bit easier to swallow. They were better. But I think when a student goes out, it's really important that they know how the adults and the leadership see them. And go, you know, yeah, go on out there, you're fine. No, well, you know, go out there and you're going to get slapped in the face because there's a lot of crazy stuff if you're acting the way you're acting, you know. So, and I think that's really cool that a lot of those, I get where your guys' hearts and minds were there. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would commend you particularly to the point that Laura brought out, relentless. There must be something wrong with that
I like it.
statement because I like it, and it's got
Just
style.
never give up, never give up.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was bold of you, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate it very much that you went to the trouble to do this. I just wasn't expecting this. But this generates discussion on us and stuff like that. And boy, that's the healthiest thing we can do is hash this stuff out.
And Vince Lombardi said, perfection is unattainable, but we will relentlessly strive to achieve it.
And I am really interested in the student perspective
Yeah.
on this, because I really believe that they are our end. And
Exactly.
so,
This-
Spencer,
this-
if you
this
have
affects
if
you.
you want to take that back and think about it, and maybe even talk with Morgan about it a little bit, I'd just like to know what your feeling is about these things that we're expecting students to be able to achieve.
My first look at it is I think it's pretty good. I'm definitely going to take it back and I think discuss it with the leadership class. I think
Great.
that'd be a good group to discuss it with. And definitely Morgan, get their opinion on it.
Great. And you mentioned the SABRE survey. What is that?
It's an assessment tool. It's spelled capital S, capital A, capital E,
EBRS.
small b, small r, small s, right? Something like
It's always a
that.
cool acronym.
It's not a sword.
No.
Oh.
But it has two different versions. There's Sabres and there's My Sabres. So the Sabres is a tool that an adult fills out about the students with whom they interact, the students in their classroom, or at the middle school, it's the students in their PAWS class. At the high school, I think it's based on one period of the day, everybody did it. But then the My Sabres, the students starting in what grade? At
I
the
don't know
elementary?
what grade. It could be, I think at least second, but the lowest is second, but I'm not sure on
But the
that.
students also
It's a
can fill out
self-assessment.
a version, the My Sabres version. So then we can look at what adults think about, you know, how emotionally, socially kids are doing. And do the kids think the same thing? And I think really, we don't have all the data yet. In the high school, I don't want to throw them under the bus because particularly they're not done. They've only done a small portion of the students. But of the portion of the students that they have done, those students are being a little harsher than the adults are.
On
as
themselves,
far
like as a self-assessment?
How they feel about their social emotional and where they are right now. So that will give us some really good information about what do we need to do to help them, you know, and we heard that in our last meeting with the kids at the high school with our last session that we did, that kids are worried about their social emotional and where they are. And I think we see that reflected for some of the kids in their work with this Sabres tool. So that gives another really good measure that the staff can use to say, okay, what problem solving can we do to provide some supports for kids if we're doing the things on this core belief statement? How are we supporting kids that are struggling because life is tough in 2018 for teenage kids? So,
And the Sabres it's a quick screener. Really, the idea is it takes about 3 minutes for a teacher to fill in the Sabres on each student. So if at the elementary level, if the teacher has 22 students, it's only
It's an
going to
hour.
take about 3 minutes per student. So, and the idea is that we do this at multiple points in the year, 2 or 3, so that we can evaluate and screen quickly the social-emotional well-being of our students. So then we can provide some interventions and supports where needed, where we see kids might be at risk.
Okay.
I have one more little thought that may go into 2B or 2C, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But, something I didn't see there that I like is measuring whether kids follow through on things they say they're going to do. When I work with the Builders Club kids, that's always a problem. This is my best example. He frequently said he would do something, and then the next meeting or 2 meetings later, he had done it. Otherwise, I have to push the kids, remind them. Laura, your granddaughter was also pretty good that way too, the
Oh,
one who's
good.
now in high school.
Good to hear.
But in any case, that's a skill that kids need to develop too, and I just didn't see that really reflected
Okay.
directly in there. So I don't know if that's worth it to you guys, but throw it out there.
yeah, we'll take it back and do some work and bring it back and
That's really
see what you
valuable, of
think.
course, to employers.
Yes.
But I want you guys, the committee, whoever, all of you who worked on this. I mean, it is good. It is good work.
It is
It
good
really
work.
is.
Okay.
But if it's going to be our policy, we gotta have our.
That's right.
too.
You do. That's
So-
why we're talking about it.
All right. Anybody else have anything for the study session? No? All right. So we're going to move to adjourn, and then we'll be starting our regular session at 6:30. Boom.
Thanks, guys.
I don't
You can wear the mic
6:30.
on your head.
Yep. All right, we're going to start this meeting. We'll start with a flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, passes. Public comment on agenda items. Nobody has signed in. Would anybody like to speak on the agenda? That was it, okay. You did one of those during a weird random. Okay, moving on then. Board member comments, and I will start to my right.
Me. Well, first I would like to say, while we were on our adventure at the WASDA conference, what a pleasure it was to spend that time with Spencer again and with Morgan. I had no idea who Morgan was, but when she is a delight to know. So I had, of course you are, Spencer. Yes, both of you are. And what I really liked about our conference was they didn't just focus on social emotional in the schools and at home, but they broke it out. They broke it apart. So they like each parts of it, because social emotional is it's huge. It's everywhere. It's whatever, but there's so many parts to it. And I'm really excited what our district, our superintendent is going to do to work all those aspects into not just our school, but how we're going to be able to use it at home. Because I'm a kid. I'm a kid. I'm a kid with a kid, and he's a tough kid. So working that social emotional into our home, I can totally relate with anybody that has a tough time with that. So I'm really excited about it.
Okay, and my experience at the conference was great, and I'm going to keep it really short just to keep the time short, but there were many good sessions that had really great opportunities to talk with other students, and not only our own students, but the student perspective on what we do as policymakers on this board is really important to me, and the more of that I can hear, the better off I think we will be when we make our decisions.
The conferences are always great learning experiences. There was one session that I thought was a little repetitious of things I've heard before, but that's because I've been around a long time. So I really enjoyed the pre-session on law, and that was very helpful. Touched on various matters of law that pertain to schools. And I attended a session that was kind of a worldview stretcher in that I went to a session sponsored by Toppenish, and they talked about their gun policy. And this is the group that has a group of teachers that are trained, marks people, carefully selected, nobody knows who they are, allegedly. And they have colored Kevlar vests so that if an incident happens, they can be identified from, the shooter. And I was just, since this is a perspective of which I'm skeptical, it was interesting hearing, just listening to what they had to say and the rationale that they gave for it. And I found that horizon stretching.
Excuse me. I was kind of actually a little bit embarrassed for myself because I always go to these conferences seeking out like tax structures and financing and really the kind of eggs and issues of what we do, the meat and potatoes, if you will. And the two classes I got the most out of were the trauma-centered schools and one that was the social emotional in the pre-conference. It's like, wow. So I'm going to start taking more of those because I find I get more of that, more thought going with those sort of classes. So,
thanks. I have a message for you folks out there. First is our study session. Thank you for most of you folks, I believe, who were in on that, what we had a really good discussion on. So thank you for that. But also a message for you from one of our former people. A couple of you, well, many of you won't know him, but Matt Charlton was there from the Manson School District, and he used to be the Belfair Elementary principal, and then of course the assistant superintendent and stuff. But mostly I want to do this because I want to embarrass myself about basketball. You're going to love this one. He used to play basketball with me in the mornings when he was here, and he's of course 8 feet tall, and I'm not very good, and he was a great basketball player. In any case, I always like to remind him of this because he doesn't remember it happening, but I sure do because it sure got me laughing. In any case, playing basketball one time here in the morning, and Laura has told me this time because I told this story to her, that he used to describe me as a little flea all over the court and stuff like that. Anyway, and you would remember that too. In any case, apparently I was being a flea, and he just saw me right in front of him. I don't think he had the ball, but he wanted to go somewhere, and I was in the way, and that's one of the things I'm good at, is getting in the way. And what he did was, literally, just coming up to me, picked me up, put me down, and went on. And he doesn't remember it. Of course, I just fell down laughing. Anyway, but he says hello to everyone he did know, and a couple of you in the back there do remember him. So there you go. He's thriving at Manson School District. Otherwise, the presentation that Manson School District put on, which Laura went to also, was eye-opening. Wow, boy, we can do some of that stuff too. Otherwise, that's enough.
okay, hold on. I'd be going out of order if I went right to you. But Morgan is not present, so we're going to skip the oath of office. And Spencer, do you have any comments to make?
Yeah. So at the high school, we are planning a winter, well, actually, Morgan's in charge of it, but we're doing a winter holiday spirit week, actually a week and a half, all the way the last 2 weeks before break. And we're going to have fun activities at lunch and before and after school for that week, so it's going to be really fun. Also, we're currently doing a Humane Society coin drive, benefiting the Humane Society. And we just finished up a food drive, and I'm working on planning the next student roundtable, which will
Okay.
include middle school kids and James A. Taylor students as well.
Awesome.
Nice.
Fantastic. All right. Consent items for the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the consent agenda?
I would like to point out that you have a paper copy of an addition to the personnel report before you. We discovered that a staff member that we had is out of endorsement. She does have a master's in this area. Oh, there it is, okay. And so the board can approve for her a temporary teaching certificate until she completes the WESTE exam, which is her final requirement. And we are asking that the board do that. She has completed a master's in special education, and she is doing a pretty strong, in fact, even powerful job in her position at the high school. So we'd like to keep her working for us while she completes that requirement.
Is everyone in agreement to having that in the consent agenda?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. I would like to pull one item out, which is the policy 6220, which was the bid or proposal requirements.
Mhm.
So I'd like to pull that for discussion and a separate action on that.
Okay?
So, as you explained to me from the conference, which is something I didn't know from Robert's Rules of Order and stuff like that, you said that you got instructed by the WASDA parliamentarian that the consent agenda does not need to be voted on.
If there's no discourse on it, so if nobody has an objection to anything. So since I wanted to pull something out, I
Right.
suggest we vote on it.
And our past practice has been, we have voted on it, and we have required people to vote. That was how we set up policy governance originally, that it would take 3 people to vote something to be taken off the consent agenda. So I'd like to kind of open it up for a little bit of discussion as to what's appropriate for us, regardless of what Robert's Rule says.
I
Do we wanna
believe
go?
that if one school board member has an issue about an item on the consent agenda, I think it's appropriate that we pull it off and discuss it at that time. I don't think we have to vote to pull it off.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
You're in charge here, so I'm just sort of
That's kind of my feelings.
facilitating discussion.
I would agree with Laura on that one, just mainly because if one person has an issue with it, it's good to have that discussion. And mine's not a huge issue, I just want clarification.
Right, then further to that is just the whole notion of voting or not voting. We could go by Robert's Rules or continue our previous practice, which at the time we set it up, it was pretty important that we did vote. Because we were dealing with, we needed to have the protection of 3 votes to make something happen so that one person didn't dominate or do something, you know, they shouldn't kind of stuff, which we had a problem with back then. In any event, so I'm throwing that back to you.
I think it's good to vote on the consent agenda, personally.
Okay,
I like the way we do it.
Okay.
I don't think it's hurting anybody. And if we changed it, it could. You know, it could leave somebody wanting more.
all right, then I will make a motion. I move that we continue to vote for or against the entire consent agenda, and that we permit one person to remove an item from the consent agenda at their discretion, as long as they tell us about that, rather than waiting, rather than having a formal motion to do that. So that is my motion.
Any discussion on that?
So, yeah, how does that square with what you said before about times, the process we have now is developed out of experience, and I would tend to go with that.
Right, and there's a part of me that wants to go with that too. On the other hand, since we got past that. We haven't had that as a problem. And I don't see that as taking one thing off the consent agenda. All that does is mean we're going to deal with it separately. And the power of the board is still a 3-vote thing.
Oh, okay, so we deal with it separately at that meeting?
No, he's talking about making sure that we just, for our practice, that we vote on a consent agenda, that we vote on the consent agenda to accept it, and that one board member, if they want to pull an item, all it takes is one member saying, I would like to pull an item.
And then we would necessarily have to deal with that item separately.
On an individual basis.
And if that person wants to throw it out, well, that takes a vote of all of us to do
So
that.
it would be discussed at that meeting? or
Yes.
not?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, well. Sure.
Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Perfect. Okay, so now I need a vote on the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda
Okay, any discussion on the consent agenda?
with the
You
exclusion
have
of the
your
one.
With the exclusion
item
of mine.
Exclusion, right.
Thank
okay.
you. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that was a long way to get there. All right, so policy 6220, real quick, was on the bid or proposal requirements.
Yes.
And on the over $75,000, the board would follow formal competitive process. And nowhere in there does it state, and I thought it was state law, that we had to take low bid. And it says number 3, like ensuring the district takes steps to ensure that when possible, the district will use small and minority businesses, women's business, enterprise, and labor surplus firms, which is great. But if they're not the low bid, someone will.
We still have to meet all the state requirements for public entities that do bidding, so
Mhm.
we are still required to take the low bid.
Okay.
But part of what that means is we need to make sure that we get bids from women and minorities.
Okay.
And we're raising the purchase from
Those
35 to 10,
Right,
75.
those dollars came from the new federal bid
Okay.
requirements. They raised them.
Okay.
And if I can add a quick comment, that's actually extremely important because our federal grant funds that we spend, if we up that threshold to 10,000, which is what the federal government's now saying we can use, when we have teachers or administrators that, let's say, want to purchase computers, and they're going to purchase $5,000 worth of computers, we're not required to go out there and get 3 quotes. We can just go with our Dell quote and purchase them from there. So it cuts down on a lot of behind-the-scenes work.
Okay. Yeah, my big thing is I understand we have to follow state law, but we're also writing a policy that doesn't necessarily explicitly state that.
We have other policies that do go into more detail regarding the competitive bid thresholds as well.
Okay.
And this particular policy does say at the very near
Did I
top,
miss it?
the requirement of complying with state and
Okay.
federal laws
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
is still there.
I would move that we approve 6220.
Do you get to make motions?
I sure do.
Oh,
Found
okay.
that out
That's a new
too.
Robert's Rules off thing also, yes.
Okay.
And any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Boom. All right. I think we're going into superintendent's report.
Well,
Nope, I'm sorry.
We do have an item on the agenda, the National School Board Association Annual Conference for out-of-state travel. We have to get approval.
Oh, yes.
And Director Patty would like to attend the National School Board Conference in the exciting city of Philadelphia this year. And so that's an item for your discussion and/or voting.
I think it's a good idea. Craig has had a great deal of political experience, hard knock variety, and I think he's well equipped to benefit and benefit us by this trip. So I support it.
And the big reason why I asked to go is there was talk about going last year, us sending someone last year,
Mhm.
and we never made a decision on doing that, so.
And
Well,
this is great because it's the first time someone will have gone, and I think maintaining a double vision, one, understanding what's happening in Washington, what the policies are or are likely to be, and then understanding the local situation gives us binocular vision, and I think that's a good.
I think it's important that one of us go. I don't think it would ever be a case where more than one person should go and bring back that information to the rest of us. We all get the propaganda from the NSBA, and we all are familiar with what they're doing. But a presence there, an actual face-to-face with people outside of our little nucleus here, I think is important. I would support that too.
I think it's good that Craig has come forward for that. There's always a possibility we might want to send someone to Washington, D.C. and then forget about the return ticket. But this sounds good.
Wow. Yeah.
So we
Good time.
I need a motion, yeah.
All right, I move that we approve the NSBA conference attendance request to spend funds and send Director Patty.
Any discussion? Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And I will abstain. Thank you. Board Development Linkage Superintendent update.
Okay. The first thing in my report that I'd like to just take a quick moment and bring your attention to the lovely seasonal decor in the room. We have Diana Graham and her class at Belfair Elementary School to thank for providing those items for us, and I think they're really cute and they make the room a lot more fun. So thank you, Mrs. Graham.
Thank you.
I particularly like the bats. That's really inspiring.
They're really cute. All right, so we'll just keep going. Budget status update.
Okay, so we have a slew of information to present tonight. So we're going to start with financial statements for last year, which were done and submitted. If we could pull up the year-end report. There we go. Okay, so this is going to give us a snapshot of where we're ending fiscal year 17-18. The first slide looks at our enrollment over a 10-year history. You can see we started back in 2008-9 at around 2,100 or 2,131 students. And then 10 years later, here in 17-18, we were right at 2,190. That's what we averaged last school year. So we're definitely on the uphill climb, as you can see there, especially if you compare where we're at currently with enrollment to this scale as well. We had budgeted at 2,229 for this year, and we're averaging upwards of 2,260 so far. So it's definitely increasing. If we can go to the next.
Actually, prior to 08, was enrollment ever higher than 08? Do we know?
You know, I can get that
It was?
information. I didn't go back past that. I know that for a time period prior to going out for the bond and getting the new school buildings built, there was declining enrollment leading up to that period. Then when the bond passed and schools started getting built, that's when they started to see the increase.
Yeah, my whole time here, the highest was the year I started, which was 2004. It's been declining ever since then until it changed now.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so our 2017-18 general fund overview. Our beginning fund balance September 1st was just over 2.5 million. We had revenues of just under 29 million last year. We had expenditures just over 28 million. We also had the transfer out. That's the payments for the debt. So that left us with an ending fund balance of 2.625 million. We had estimated in the budget that our ending fund balance was going to be just over 2.5 million. So we were in excess of that, about $100,000 at year end. Now that $2.625 million does take into account non-liquid assets, so inventory, non-spendable items. So it's not like we have 2.6 million physical dollars, but the ending fund balance for reporting purposes is 2.6 million. We have about $200,000 though sitting out there of inventory that would be taken from that balance. Okay, so here's a 2-year comparison as far as the breakdown of revenues. So it shows where our revenues were coming from in 2016-17 and 17-18, broken down through all of our major sources. The biggest place where you're going to see that jump is under that state general apportionment, where we received the additional $2.8 million. due to increased enrollment and under other funding increases, we ended up getting just about $2 million in the forest money that we ended up being able to keep. That was not taken back. That is accounted for there as well. Okay, so this breaks it down by expenditures by activity. So this gives you an idea of how we're spending our money. So regular instruction, so this is teaching in the classroom, accounts for about 50% of our overall expenditures at just over 14 million. Our special education program as a whole accounts for about 11%. We're right over $3 million as far as expenditures in that program. CTE is just under 1.2 million, or accounts for about 4% of our expenditures. Our other compensatory programs, or other programs that are funded through categorical funding, this could be like ELL, accounts for about 6% of our expenditures, or 1.8 million.
And for those other categories, special education, et cetera, the staffing costs are built into that, correct?
Correct.
So that's
Exactly.
different from the regular instruction.
Correct. Yep. What they like to do, especially right now with the legislative information coming out, is they like to showcase what your special education costs really are for the school district, because there's talk of the special education side not being fully funded and more money needing to be put into that category. So that's one of the things that we really want to highlight through this entire process is what are our expenses associated with special education, and are we receiving enough money? Last year, we had 270,000 of our local dollars that went into helping supplement our special education program because we had not, it was underfunded by state and federal. So we had to use our local levy dollars to help support it.
Is that the case for this year too?
This year it's going to be really hard to say for a few reasons. One, we did receive an increase in SPED funding, but we won't really get to see how that plays out until after January, because we had a significant SPED enrollment spike this year that we were not expecting. So when they shuffle all of our numbers and realign our funding in January, we'll have a better idea as to whether or not we're going to be considered technically fully funded for SPED, or whether or not we're going to be pulling from local levy again. So I can give you guys a better update come February. So the other instructional programs, this is very, very small grant funded programs that we receive. This would be things like ESHE, like sexual wellness, health class. Those type of programs go into those other instructional programs that are separated out. Support and community service. This is both the operation of Feller, which was split out up until this year. We're no longer splitting it out because it's now considered one of our educational buildings. But for last year it was Feller, and it was also the support costs for basically operating the district. It accounts for $5 million, or 18% of our overall operating costs. Food service came in at just over $1 million, and transportation was right around 1.75. So that's basically the breakout of how we spent our $28 million last year and where we were putting our funds. So this goes into a little bit more detail and breaks it down into specific objects of expenditures. So we can see that certificated salaries made up about just over $10.5 million, or just under 38% of our overall expenditures. Classified salaries accounts for just over 18%. Benefits for both groups is right at 23%. And then we have our supplies and our materials. So this is anything from the purchase of pens to some lighting fixtures are going to be under the supplies and materials at just at 7.5%. Purchase services, we do have a higher expense amount in purchase services for last year due to the contracting out for our OT and PT and such, because we could not hire those certificated positions at the school district. The hopes always is to hire them, and then you would see an increase in certificated and a decrease in purchase services if those positions can be filled here. Travel, we were just under 115,000, so it accounts for less than 1/2 of 1%. And then capital outlay, so this would be purchases or constructions of buildings in excess of $5,000 that are improving the building. We were at, it was super fractional, way less than 1%, under 100,000. Capital Projects Fund. So our revenue for Capital Projects Fund in 17-18 is coming from Breakview School District for their, basically their bond percentage. They've made their last payment. We're not receiving any more payments from Breakview. We also had state match. We do still have some state match left on some of the other buildings that we're currently in the process of closing out. And then our state and federal forest dollars. We received quite a bit of those forest dollars last year. So far, I've seen none this year. So I'm hoping that we'll see some more come in, but with the amount that we received last year when they cut down trees, they don't pop up overnight.
Yeah.
So we're likely gonna see quite a bit less there this coming year. Expenditures, our biggest expenditure that last year was the stadium, working towards the completion of that project, and then getting the little odds and ends done with our other buildings to be able to complete those. So our beginning fund balance was at 4.1 million. Our revenues that came in from those three areas accounted for about 1.5 million. Our expenditures were just over 3 million, left us with an ending fund balance of 2.5, which is just where we were expecting to be by end of the year.
Little question
Uh-huh.
on the state forest fund. Our district is, I think, 7th in the state for amount of acreage that is generating income for the state forest fund. Does the state simply aggregate all of it together and then apportion it out, or is it done on that basis of how big your district is?
It's done on the actual trees that are sold from within your district.
Yeah.
So it's, it changes every year, you know, so if some years we have a lot of logging on those state forest lands, then we will have a bigger check than years when maybe they're not doing any logging on the state forest lands.
Oh, there's logging going on now. They're
Yeah.
gonna be logging right next door to me.
Okay, so debt service, we're receiving our revenues from our local property taxes, timber excise taxes, and then that general fund transfer that I use in order to pay that our non-voted debt. Our expenditures are always going to be our principal and interest for voted and non-voted debt. Our beginning fund balance was right over 1.8 million. We had 3.7, almost $3.8 million come in for revenue from those three activities, and we had expenditures of 3.1 million. So our ending fund balance actually increased fairly significantly to 2.5 million. This is going to be hugely helpful with the decrease of levy dollars that we're going to be collecting and the fact that our debt service payments are increasing. So that gives us a little bit of cushion to be able to make our payments in December, which I'm getting ready to do. So transportation, this fund, we get money through state depreciation. There's other ways that you can get revenue for this fund, such as a redirection of general apportionment dollars. We didn't use any of that this last year, so we just had our depreciation dollars, which this year it was only 122,000. And then we had some buses scrapped and some other material scrapped, which ended up bringing us up to 123 for revenues. Our beginning fund balance was 376, but then they purchased those 3 buses, which came off the books in September. So with our expenditures out, it dropped our ending fund balance to 152,000. We just bought a bus. We do have a new bus on fleet, which cost 140. So our fund balance is looking a little sad currently, but we're in the process of requesting a reimbursement for a portion of that through that grant that I have applied for. ASB, so the revenue comes in from our clubs, our athletic fees, fundraisers. The expenditures are basically anything that you can associate with ASB, both cultural, athletic, recreational, or social. They started the year at 293,000. They received $436,000 worth of revenue and spent quite a bit less, so their fund balance actually is ending at $334,000.
Didn't you project it was going to be less than what our beginning fund balance is on that one?
For this year.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
This is still last year's report.
And so, and the way that the ASB fund is done, so the buildings actually make, so the students make their own budgets. So it's basically based upon what the students feel like they're going to be doing for fundraising activities or bringing in through fees, and offset regarding what they're expecting to be utilizing the funds for. So yeah, this year they're stating that they're going to be dipping into that. We'll see if that actually ends up playing out. So that's where we ended the year for 17-18. I do, if we can go back, Denise, to the agenda, and if you can click on the F-196 and go to page 2. I want to call you guys' attention to the certification page. So this is the page that Dan assigned certifying the financial statements. It gives you a snapshot of all of our funds and where we're ending the year. So if you want some general overview for any of our funds, you can get that right here on this page. It lets you know if we did have an excess of revenue or if we had more expenditures than revenues in any of our funds, and then lets you know where we're ending for each one of our funds and total dollar value associated with all of our funds combined.
The first slide that you had regarding local property taxes, I noticed that this year was less than last year. Not by much, but it was less. Why?
Less people paying their property taxes.
Okay.
So that's normally where we see that because we levy out at the same rate. Now what ends up happening with that, so that amount that wasn't collected that technically was billed out, I have to certify our levy by the 30th of this month for this next coming year. So I take that amount that was left over remaining and I add it into what we're certifying and certify for a higher amount so that they can collect that full amount. But we have that rollback that we're accounting for next year of $750,000.
Right.
That will end up offsetting it.
Okay.
So does that mean if there's 10 deadbeat taxpayers here that later on all the other 100 of us have to cover for?
The politically correct answer would sort of be yes. It gets redistributed. So
Well,
yes,
that's good to know.
because we levy at that higher rate and it gets redistributed amongst the group.
Because what we get is a fixed amount,
Mhm.
regardless of where it comes from.
Correct.
But we get that fixed amount, so it has to come, okay, got it.
Yep.
But our fixed amount is going down as a
Right.
result of the McCleary solution.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it anywhere else to do my notes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Ashley has a sick child at home, so I'm gonna let her kind of finish her financial report so she can
It's a
head out.
7-year-old demanding I put him to bed. So, okay, so if you guys remember from last month, I didn't present too much information on September because we were still in the process of shifting money from September to back to August for accruals for the financial statement process. So I'm going to do a brief synopsis for September and then show you October. Don't get scared when you look at September. Okay, I'm just gonna throw that out there. October looks a lot better. September's always a hard month. Okay, so we'll start with the dashboard. So this is our first month of this fiscal year, and so the numbers can seem a tad bit daunting. I particularly want to call your guys' attention to, if we look at the second page, our expenditure page, because I do have to report to you guys on our fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures. If you're looking at that green semicircle at the top, that number, our goal is always to keep it at 8% or above. So what that's telling you right now is as of September 30th, we only had 5.65% of basically a fund balance against our expenditures, okay? So we were under that 8% threshold. There's a multitude of reasons for this occurring. A lot of it is the school year starting up, and you have all of those supply purchases, all of those equipment purchases that are done at the very beginning of the year to get people through the school year. So it's very common for us to see our expenditures a lot higher in September, and then it tapers off throughout the rest of the year to balance out our fund balance. But that is what it was for September. It's much better now though in October. Okay,
Good news.
so.
Waive that policy.
I know, seriously. Okay, so if we go to the next tab, so our month-end balances, The nice thing about this one is there was a change with Forecast 5 with how they're presenting our scale for month-end balances. That little triangle, the green triangle on the far right-hand side, that's where it has us trending as far as our end-of-the-year budget goes, as far as what the fund balance should be. And then it shows, that blue line shows you where we're tracking. So you can see that that blue line is significantly over the prior 2 years. And this is because this is our year where we still got to collect more levy dollars before next year's where we aren't going to be collecting that money. So it does show higher fund balances this year. That's all based upon projections, so that's if we were to spend exactly how we'd spent in our previous years. So if we can go to the next slide. So this gives you basically a snapshot for the month of September for where we were spending and if we were over in any areas. For the month of September, federal grant funding, we're always going to see some issues there for the month of September because OSPI is just getting around to approving our grants. So I haven't claimed very much for the current year, so our trends are going to be off. So that's why you're seeing the red there. Our surplus and deficit, I wouldn't worry too much about that, seeing as how it is September, and we will see it balance out. And then we have a high-level report on our last slide, which will show you all of our variances. So if you look down, first line under expenditure, so middle of the page basically, and it says salaries, certificated employees. And you go over to the side and you see, oh, we're over $245,132. That's where, as of right now, based upon the trends and based upon what we negotiated, it shows that we're going to be over budget for certificated salaries by just under $250,000. That's if we pay out at the exact same rate that we were paying out in September throughout the course of the year. So if any certificated employees receive additional pay for anything else, that number will increase. So that's basically where we're starting base. We will be $250,000 over budget for certificated salaries, and then anything else we do will add to that deficit. So, and if you guys remember, we did the budget and we approved the budget prior to NMEA negotiations being completed. So we were just sort of taking somewhat educated guesses on where we were going to land. So to only be off $250,000 actually isn't that bad. And then the other areas that you're seeing that are in red right there, like the one that's for $391,000, again, that's due to not being able to hire in-house our certificated OT, PT that we were hoping to be able to hire, and we end up contracting for those positions instead of having them up in that certificated area. So that's September. October looks a lot nicer. So if we can switch over to that. And then with October's, I gave you guys the printed version of our other funds. With the slew of paperwork that I was sending over to Denise, I missed sending her this one, so I gave you guys a paper version. So this will go over our other budgets. For the month of October, capital projects is ending just over $2.4 million. This is to finish out the stadium and then do work on the softball field. Debt service went up due to property tax collections. So we're at $3.3 million there. ASB, we're sitting at $385,000. And I apologize, you guys, there's only a paper form. We do not have the electronic version up there. And then transportation vehicles at $152,000 as of the end of October. But we just cut the payment on November 15th for that bus, so it drops down to $12,000. Enrollment is on the second page. And so enrollment for the month of November, we went down 4 FTE approximately in November, but we're still trending significantly over budgeted, approximately 35 over budgeted.
In October?
No, this is November's. I pull in the current as well. So we have September, October, and November reported currently. So that's where we are with the enrollment. So now we can do our dashboard for October. So if we can go to our second page, So this is where we see that our projected year-end balance as a percent of expenditures is actually at 10.11% right now. So we're just over 2% over our 8% minimum threshold for fund balance. Our fund balance currently is over 3 million, which is higher than it has been in quite a few years. Again, October was the month that we collected property taxes, which is what increased our fund balance for the month of October. This is going to help us with the additional cushion that was needed to pay the increased certificated salaries. And then if we go to our next page, so our month-end balances, our 3-year trend, you'll see for the month of November, our blue line is above both of our prior years, which is what we would expect at this point to be trending upwards of that, of the prior 2 years. And then next year is when we will see that it will dip. So the next page, or our financial summary, you can see that it has us at 3.128 million for a fund balance. And you can see that we're, a lot of the red that was in the prior months is now gone. So we have some transfers. These transfers, where it says the negative 1,153, those are like our co-curricular transfers for transportation and such for ASB, and that's immaterial. But it normally nets out over the course of a few months. And then the next slide. So you'll start seeing more red again here. And again, even with where we were at for October, you're still seeing those negatives, but you can see that 245,000, we haven't added anything to it, meaning that our expenditures for October are trending exactly the same as where they were for September, which is good. So we're just going to keep an eye on that and make sure that it's not going too high, and if it is, that we figure out what's causing it. That's all I have for the month of October. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about that financial statements? Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, good job.
Thank you.
Oh, it's back to me now.
Now it's up to Dana.
Oh, it's
Are we
still
all
you.
coming up?
Yep, it's still me, and now we are going to hear from all of our buildings on the school success plans. The high school staff, packet is going to stand in for Ann a little bit on the Taylor report because Ann is not able to be with us this evening.
Good evening, School Board, Superintendent Rosenbaugh. We would like to thank you for the opportunity to share our school success plans this evening with you. We wanted to change it up a little this year and have all the schools in the district present on the same night. All schools in the district are still on the same page and focused on similar goals. This work continued at a 2-day district admin retreat in August. And then we all had a 1-day building leadership team retreat the following week in August. This evening you will hear a few highlights on this year's continued work from each school, and I will get us started from North Mason High School. Our number one goal is still to improve first instruction for all students. We were lucky enough to have an instructional coach at the high school now who's focusing on supporting all of our teachers, and with an emphasis on teachers year 1 and 2. We added a second ELL teacher to our teaching staff, which has been amazing. We added a new position. We have a new Dean of Students, Steve Hackett, in the main office, who's focusing on supporting our students and focusing on working with students that are credit deficient. We're trying to target them early on rather than later and see if we can get them through. So it's been a nice addition to our administrative crew. We also were lucky to reinstate a career counselor at the high school this year. This is my 9th year as principal of the high school, and this year we have more college talk in the high school than I've ever seen. Our new career counselor took a crew. He's been doing college visits weekly. A crew went to the UW today. On next Monday, they're going to St. Martin's. And it's cool to get kids that have never thought about college going to see a college campus. I think it's pretty powerful.
Want questions at the end or as you go?
End. North Mason High School is implementing AVID this year. AVID is Advancement via Individual Determination. And that is our piece of our district's MTSS, multi-tier system of support, social and emotional work. That's our piece at North Mason High School this year. AVID is a program for middle-of-the-road kids, first-generation college kids, kids that have never thought about going to college, never thought they could. We're going to get them there. Superintendent Rosenbaugh has experience with this program, and she's been talking about it with me for a couple years, and we dove in. Steve and I took 8 staff to San Diego last summer, end of July, for intense AVID training, and it was amazing. I took a good cross-section of the staff, counselor, social studies, math reps, and what it is, AVID is a college readiness system. There's a difference between being college eligible. Every high school graduate is college eligible and college ready. And we're going to get our kids college ready. AVID teaches certain strategies that are good for all kids, but necessary for some kids. We'll eventually be going building wide with these strategies, but we're going slow. Right now, a main piece of AVID is focused note-taking. What we're focusing on are Cornell note-taking. Colleges use it. So when our kids leave North Mason High School, and if they choose to go to college, they're going to be ahead of the game. We also have, we hand-picked 20 AVID students that are in an AVID elective class every day. So we have a teacher, Jeff Beavers, who his family has experience with AVID in the Bremerton School District. He's been pushing for this also. So he's our AVID elective teacher. So he has 20 kids that he meets with second period every day. And they're working on these strategies in addition to doing tutorials in this AVID elective class that support their other classes that they're currently taking. And also we're working on bringing in community members to help run these tutorials. And when we're up and going completely, it's pretty amazing. Our goal is to add, we started with sophomores this year, we have 20 sophomores. We're going to add another grade level next year, and eventually we'll have an AVID elective class for all 4 grades. I already mentioned this, but when we've gone to the AVID training, the piece that stands out to me is good for all, but necessary for some. And we're really excited about it. And our AVID kids have been included on these college visits. They've been going to these college field trips also. So that's North Mason High School. I'll turn it over to Steve Hackett, who's just going to give a highlight on James Taylor this year. And Steve.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so obviously Ann can't be here. You guys know about that. You have her success plan there from James Taylor. One thing we wanted to note, though, and have it kind of brought to the attention was the way they've changed taking classes down there. We thought it was really impactful and very, very cool, so we wanted to make sure it was heard today. Is in the past, they've taken multiple classes at the same time. So multiple subjects, a student would take all of them at the same time. And then if they're struggling or get bored or whatever happens, they kind of change and go to another class, and they're finding that their success rate wasn't what they wanted. And so they changed it up this year, worked with some other schools and figured out what's worked in other places. And they've taken it where students take one subject at a time. You spend 4 weeks and we're going to knock out history or math or whatever it is, and we're going to really dive into it. And they found the success rate to go up dramatically with that, and that it's been really successful in the first month or so, 2 months of having it, and so they expect to see that to continue. So, I mean, that's great to hear that it's going well down there, and so we wanted to make sure that point was brought, and you have the rest of her success plan there, but we think that's pretty cool for everybody. So.
At Hawkins, we're going to continue a lot of the work we've been doing. We're no longer a priority school, but we want to see greater growth in our students. We're not happy with where our students are right now. So this year our goals were that our students will demonstrate a 20% growth in all academic areas by May of 2019, and that with consistent behavioral expectations school-wide for all staff and students to improve classroom environment and reduce ODRs and suspensions by 30%. To do that, some new things we have is we have a second counselor. Both counselors are working really hard at doing small group conflict resolution so that the things that happen in middle school don't grow till it becomes a suspensionable, but also teaching kids those managements that they need to self-regulate. In addition to that, we're have a second ELL instructor to try and help our kids. Our Tier 1 kids were getting a lot of support, but our Tier 2 or 3 and 4 kids weren't getting the support. They kind of were out in the classroom fending for themselves. So now there's that additional push-in support. She's a master teacher working with teachers on how to serve our ELL population and helping get that growth up there. In addition to that, we're working at increasing our rigor. Continuing with our workshop and constructed writing. We really have been focusing on writing at Hawkins, but making sure that the rigor is pushing our kids and making sure that they understand we have high expectations for them and they're capable of reaching those high expectations. For our behavioral competencies, we're really working hard at taking what we've been doing and creating solid systems with data. When a kid does this, what then? So we're having a lot of that. The new assistant principal brings a lot of wealth of knowledge into that area, and so it's been really helping guide our teams into getting to that. We're working really hard. Our teacher learning walks are increasing. Teachers are doing more longer and enjoying that chance to see each other. We have 9 new bodies in our building, so it gives a chance for them to really get to know and get wrapped around and get strong teaching support to help with their students and learning. In addition to this year, one of the 2 big highlights we have is we have a watchdog program up and running. We're averaging 2 adults per week coming in, helping, they're monitoring, they're stepping in class. Today she was in the library doing some makeup testing with kids that were absent last week. So they're getting that opportunity. And then the other thing is our science program is super strong. If you guys get a chance, I encourage you to come by. There's not a day you can't walk into a science classroom and see kids fully engaged, hands-on activities. We now have a Technology Students Association, and they're getting revved up to do a robotics competition. Their first competition is a boat building out of cardboard, and if they can get across a body of water without it sinking, they're eligible for a prize. So this will be interesting to see what we have. So I fully encourage you guys to come see. Like I said, our science program is pretty awesome just to walk in and see what's happening. So that's pretty much what's going on in Hopkins.
Okay. So good evening. You all know me. I'm Dan King, the principal at Belfair Elementary. I'm not sure if you know our assistant principal now is Stephanie Brush. So I'd like you to meet Stephanie, and together we're going to share our plan. So as Mr. Collins mentioned, our plan was developed with our leadership teams together in August. You'll notice that the Belfair plan includes supports and action steps that are centered around whole child, whole school, and whole community. And further, our success plan focuses on academic, behavior, and social-emotional competencies that make up the whole child. Within our framework, we have 2 overarching goals. The first is to implement strategies and supports to create a culture that promotes the social, emotional well-being of all members within the school community. The second goal is to create a strong partnership between the school and families and to increase community presence within the school. The desired result of these 2 goals is to increase school attendance by 15% and decrease student office disciplinary referrals by 15% as well. Further, we aim to increase parent and community volunteer participation at school and at family engagement events by 15% also. You may have noticed that our plan does not include an explicit academic goal. However, it is our belief that by focusing on the social-emotional well-being of our students, we will see an increase in academic achievement as measured by standardized tests. In fact, research supports that students who participate in an evidence-based social-emotional learning program show an overall 11% gain in academic achievement.
So once again, I'm Stephanie Brush. I'm the assistant principal at Belfair Elementary. As you can see in our plan, we're doing many different things to support the whole child academically, behaviorally, and social-emotionally. I'd like to highlight some of the key social-emotional supports that we have implemented that we feel have had the biggest impact or will have the biggest impact and the greatest gains for our students. The first is that all of our teachers are teaching the Second Step program. Second Step is an evidence-based pre-K through grade 8 social-emotional or SEL curriculum. We've been using Second Step at Belfair Elementary for a few years now, but it was not taught school-wide at each grade level with fidelity. What's new this year is that every teacher in kindergarten through grade 5 is teaching the program weekly. They now have access to all the online resources, which include videos and songs for each lesson and professional development tools as well. In addition to Second Step's SEL program, we've added this year the Second Step Bully Prevention Toolkit for kindergarten through 5th grade. These units teach students what bullying is and how to respond to bullying in a positive way. Another way that we're addressing social-emotional learning is through our Peaceful Playgrounds program. The program includes over 100 games and activities that are played on colorful templates that have been painted out on our playground. Students are taught the rules of all the games, and they learn ways to solve conflicts peacefully. The positive effects of this recess program were immediately noticeable the first weeks of school, and we're looking forward to more good results from it. Last, I'd like to mention our Watchdogs program. Watchdogs stands for Dads of Great Students. It's a nationally recognized program that focuses on bringing fathers and father figures into the school for a minimum of 1 day per year. Their role at the school is to provide an extra layer of safety and support at the school during lunch, during recess, and to help out in the classroom. We had over 200 dads and kids at our Watchdogs pizza night last month, and we had over 60 dads sign up to be a watchdog. We're holding another watchdog event in this winter so that we can recruit even more dads to be involved in this program.
As you can see, we're doing many great things to support our students' social-emotional well-being at our school. There's so much more within our school success plan that we didn't have time to talk about. We hope you had the opportunity, or we'll take some time later, to look at all the things we have included in our success plan and to support students academically, behaviorally, and socially, emotionally. Before we close, however, I'd like to add that the programs that Stephanie has highlighted would all be considered Tier 1 interventions within a multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS framework. The most important thing we are doing as a school and as a district to support students' social-emotional well-being is that we have MTSS teams at the district and school levels using data and working to put viable and sustainable evidence-based practices in place which will support the whole child at the Tier 1 level for all students, Tier 2 level for those students needing additional support, and Tier 3 level for those students needing intensive intervention. At Belfair Elementary, we have a dedicated MTSS team that meets monthly to focus on school-wide Tier 1 supports. And we have a Tier 2 and 3 team that meets every other week to look at ways to support those students needing extra support and intensive intervention. It is the work of these MTSS teams that will have the greatest impact within our schools over time. And I want to thank Beth Bork, and she's not here tonight, but I want to thank Beth Bork for her leadership with this effort.
So as Dan mentioned, we feel that focusing on the social-emotional learning of our students will result in an increase in attendance, fewer disciplinary referrals, and a higher level of family engagement. We feel that our focus on SEL will also help students engage in the learning process better. The 3 programs that I talked about, the Second Step, the Peaceful Playgrounds, and Watchdogs, each help create a school culture and climate that's safer and calmer for students. It's a lot easier for students to be excited about coming to school each day to do their best to learn when they know that they can be safe from physical and emotional harm, and when school is fun and engaging for them as well. Also, students will learn better when they have the right supports in place that they need to be successful. So we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share with you some of the key components of our plan tonight, and we'll be happy to answer any questions when we come to that part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, board, and thank you to Dan and Stephanie. Since we're both elementary schools, I glean a lot of knowledge from them, and we try to coordinate our efforts because we have the same kids. So I won't try to double up on the stuff, but a lot of the things they touched on in the last paragraph with MTSS is very important and similar, exactly what we're doing as well. So our instructional leadership team met in August as well, and I'm sorry I didn't introduce Amber Nygaard, our assistant principal. Did I introduce myself?
No. No.
I'm Jason Slazer, principal. So I just get right into it. So our instructional leadership team met this summer, and we came to we created 2 goals collectively. One we put a percentage to, and we felt like this percentage would allow us to make a significant dent in some of the achievement gaps that we're seeing with our data. So the first goal we came up with was 80% of our students will show academic growth towards ELA and math proficiency as measured by the SBAC, the ELPA 21, which is the SBAC for our ELL population, the MAP testing, it's a measurement of academic progress, as well as the MPG, which is the MAP for primary grades. So looking at all these assessments, we're looking to see growth in 80% of our kids. Not that 20 are going to decline, but this is a smart, measurable, attainable goal that we feel we can achieve. We will measure success by an increase in state assessment scores and a decrease in major behavioral discipline forms as collected in our SWIS data system. That's the system we use that we track our major behavioral incidences throughout the school day. We feel like a decrease in that area will allow us to increase in our academics.
Another goal that we've set is that we're also, like Belfair Elementary, we're implementing strategies and supports that promote the social emotional well-being of our students using Second Step curriculum with Fidelity and a focused effort on providing professional development and training and support for all of our staff that is using those curricula as well. We'll measure our success through our SABRS, our social emotional academic screener that we've just started beginning. It's a progress monitoring tool, and using the EES parent survey data and looking at that data to see an increase in our perceptions and beliefs from our stakeholders. Like the other buildings, we've divided up into whole child, whole school, whole community, our pillars for our whole district. Belfair Elementary has touched on a lot of the different parts. So in academic engagement, we've committed to making sure that we're consistent, student-focused, progress monitored, and differentiated workshops and interventions when we're deciding what our academic engagement looks like, feels like, and exists in our classrooms. We want to improve and support the improvement and knowledge of core instruction using GLAD strategies, walk to read programs, extra effort and focus of inclusion, and support for our ELD kiddos, and one-on-one small groups as necessary. To address behavioral competencies for the whole child, we're continuing with our PBIS work that has been in place for a few years, the elementary schools, teaching and modeling, and continuing to teach and model appropriate behaviors that we're requesting and expecting, using check-in, check-outs, documenting our behaviors, and when we have out-of-school suspensions, having a re-engagement procedure in those for our high tier 3 kiddos to make sure that they're coming and re-engaging back into the school environment successfully. Meeting the social emotional needs with the Second Step, teaching mindful strategies not just to our students but our staff as well, modeling those behaviors in front of the kids when we need to tune into being mindful. The play-based kindergarten learning has been exciting to watch and see the engagement and the excitement for the kids, that while they think they're playing, we're seeing some really lifelong learning strategies that they're doing in that collaborative play. we really focus on, and I hope that when the admin team came last week to see our building, that they see our warm welcomes for all of our students. Our goal is that they are getting no less than 4 positive welcomes when they're coming into our building, from leaving the bus to the front door to by the time they get to their class, and then doing the same thing as they leave and having very optimistic, caring goodbyes as they're leaving our care and going home too. So those are some of our whole child supports that we're focusing on.
And the whole school, we are fortunate to have an instructional coach in our building, Tina Effray, who has organized teacher learning walks. This allows teachers to not only get into their colleagues' classes and see what they're doing in the same grade level, but also some vertical teaming. What is the next grade up doing so that I can adjust my curriculum here so that my kids can be successful in the next grade. For our behavioral competencies for the whole school, we issue positive tickets for kids showing respect, making good decisions, and solving problems. And we celebrate them at school-wide assemblies or pod parties, and we invite families to come in and celebrate with us, trying to touch those kids who are doing the right thing every day. We tend to focus a lot of our energy on the kids who are making poor decisions, but we want to recognize those kids who are making all the right decisions. Also, we opened a positive shop where they can take their positive tickets and then spend them to buy trinkets that they're going to take home.
Did you bring any trinkets?
Huh?
Did you bring any trinkets?
No, I did not.
They bought
them all. Another thing we talk about through the teacher evaluation process to help with the social emotional aspect, but also academic engagement of the student, is empowering kids to be a part of their goal setting and their monitoring their own growth. So whether that's in kindergarten, having a rainbow chart where kids can see where they're at and they need to count to 20. Where are you at now? Let's do a simple bar graph and talk about it, set that goal, and watch that goal increase so kids are involved in their education even at that young of an age. Whole community, they've all said the Watchdog program, many modes of communication, from paw prints that we send out twice a month. Facebook, I have a Facebook page. We do robocalls, Remind 101. We have family nights. We just had our Fall Into Learning night. Classroom volunteers, and also just teaching these emotional regulations and being open and transparent about what we teach kids to families. When we call for disciplinary reasons or what the case may be, we talk about these emotional regulation strategies. And then to sum it all up with what Dan had said, that when kids are able to regulate their emotions and we give them strategies to use when they identify their current emotion, that will ultimately achieve their performance academically. So we thank you all for listening to our presentations. If you have any questions for us all as a group or individual school, we'll take questions now.
I do have a couple of questions. What is the second step with PD?
Okay, yeah.
Professional development, I
So
understand.
professional development.
So what's the second step?
Second step is a social emotional curriculum. And
Okay.
so it's teaching, one component is the bullying, that's been the anti-bullying curriculum. It's teaching Kelso's choices, different behavioral engagement strategies, problem-solving strategies, and emotional regulation. So those are taught intentionally in all of the classes, and we've scheduled a time weekly to ensure that all students are getting it on a weekly basis.
And the PD, as our counselor, provides professional development to our staff on how to access that curriculum and then how to teach it, and is a support for our staff who teach that every Monday.
Okay. And how do you administer the EES parent survey?
So I know when I joined Sandhill last year, the way we did it is as families come in to the buildings, we can give them paper copies or put them on a computer and they can answer the survey. We blasted the link out, and so families could do it at home as well and go on and answer the surveys. That same survey is given to our students for their perception, to where they can tell us how they're feeling and how they feel cared for and their experience through the day, as well as our staff.
Do you get a pretty good response from the parents? I mean, in terms of numbers?
I felt like we had a pretty positive response.
Okay.
Not as much as we would like.
Okay.
But it was with the turnover that we had last year, and making sure we got the survey information in. I felt like we had a pretty good response. We saw a very good view of what our families felt.
Okay. And Hawkins, the mustard, mayo, and ketchup?
So part of that is a strategy for differentiation. We've been teaching the staff, you know, what do kids have to do? That's the mustard, must do. And then the mayonnaise is when you're done with that, what do you do next? So the kids that are accelerated or they understand the concept, teachers are providing an activity that extends the learning. And then the catch-up is, you know, if you're falling behind, if you were absent, here's what you need to get back on page with the rest of your class, so that it gives the kids strategies. So if you walk into a classroom and see that, you see a teacher have those 3 categories, so that kids can kind of self-direct where they need to go to get caught up to the final piece, as well as giving our advanced students more challenges to get working.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you. And then at the high school in the AVID class, you're taking students to visit colleges. What about students that are not college bound? What opportunities do they have to see technical colleges, for instance, or specialty schools?
I believe our career counselor is arranging those also.
Okay, but not necessarily for just the AVID?
Correct.
Okay, they would be for
all
all.
kids.
And James Taylor, can you answer this? Do they also go and check out different schools?
They do. They've been on the tours lately,
Oh,
on the buses. You know, Mr. Mosby setting up bus tours, and
Their
James Taylor
their
students
counselor's
are on
gone.
there. Their counselor goes with them.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, good, thank
Very
you.
cool.
Yeah, very cool.
I have a question. Dan, you had mentioned Cornell note-taking.
That was with the AVID program.
Okay, what's Cornell note-taking?
It's a form of focused note-taking. It's a format where you have a student writes down the essential question for the lesson, and as they take notes, they're working on answering that question and reviewing their notes, and there's definitely a format to it.
So it sounds like that while they're listening to something and taking notes, they're already rehearsing elements of it, and so they're owning what they're hearing and not just trying to get down verbatim.
Like when I was in school and I took notes, you just took notes and you're done with them.
Yeah, right.
And this, once we eventually go building wide, all teachers will be able to say, you know, pull out your Cornell notes and they'll be able to review from yesterday, and it's supposed to enhance their learning.
Are these available?
You can find them online.
I can
There's a
find
template right here, if you'd
Oh.
like. I'll show it to you later. Okay. I got
Thank you,
it.
Laura.
I got it.
Yeah, it's well known. Dan has talked about it to me for years, and we're excited we're diving in.
Yeah, I just wanted, the other observation I had was talk about alignment. The complete concert of things I've heard this evening corresponds with all kinds of WASDA programs that I've had for the last 3 years. The social emotion thing began over here, sort of on my periphery. Kids that had particular traumas, life experiences, this kind of thing, they needed to be attended to. And then it's burgeoned into other areas as well. And while I was listening to you folks, I was pleased, one, that every one of you seemed to have a really precise focus. That told me you're really serious about it. And that's good, because this would only ordinarily be dismissed as touchy-feely. And I feel, without touching, that you are prepared to rebut that, and that you are seriously focusing on doing some things. And if you listen to what you're saying, it has an academic component. I would just really love to see the stats, you know, in a year or so, to see how this is coming, because this seems to be a major learning innovation that is one of the things that I think will change even further what we understand as education.
Good.
Follow that.
I can't. I don't know how to. Joe, for Hawkins, your goal: students will demonstrate 20% growth in all academic areas by May next year. Is that is that all 400?
Science, 502.
500 and how many?
We have 502 students.
502 students. I mean, So the top end, bottom end, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's when we did our needs assessment last year for our title. We realized that one of the areas we haven't pushed is our upper end kids. They've kind of come into Hawkins and it's kind of stagnated. So we're really working ways with the catch-up mustard. It's getting those kids to extend and grow as fast as others. So
Okay.
they're also having that growth.
Awesome. I really appreciate, I mean, Jason, you hit it specifically, but all of you have the SMART strategies, which, you know, they're attainable, realistic, all those things, and I appreciate that from my perspective. But then my big question to all of you, and is we got in our study session, and you can't look down at the end there because you have to stay out of this. We got this core value thing, or core beliefs of the district MTSS team. You guys buy into that?
100%.
So I guess I ask is, based off your career, is this the make or break for us? And I mean that by, I mean, is this where we need to go? A yes or no answer.
I would
Yeah.
say that it's what we're tasked with. If we don't believe those things, if we don't promise and commit to those things, then we've kind of lost why we're here.
Exactly.
As we develop them and fine tune them as a team, as a district, as a community, then we're gonna start to see a change in society as well as education, because I think we need a uptick in that.
And the other piece of that is it addresses the equity, making sure that all of our students are getting everything they need instead of just a few.
So we talked about it, and I think we're all bought in. And so, as you work with her, she works with us, and we'll get you guys hopefully what you need from us to make it happen.
I just wanted to ask one thing about that, and this is to leapfrog on something that Craig said. So do you think this creed helps teachers to understand there to be educational professionals here? Do you think it aids professionalism? It's perfectly okay to say no to me, you know, but
We are on, we're being recorded.
So, what we're really aiming to develop each individual staff member and student into a leader. Really, that's what our aim is. Everyone is a leader, and everyone has a role in supporting the whole community, the whole school, and the whole child. So, yeah, it's really to help develop leaders who are professionals that are here for a purpose, and that is to help every child be successful.
All right, do you have anything?
I could lead. It's just great.
Well said.
I don't have any questions, but a comment or two or whatever. I think it was last year that I saw the focus from all of you to start getting more into the whole child, the whole school, the whole community stuff. And I was really pleased about that, in particular the play in kindergarten focus and stuff like that. But at the WASTA conference that we just came back from, I attended one session in which scared the daylights out of me. Bullying, the amount of bullying. Now, this is a suspect statistic, but the amount of bullying roughly nationwide, it wasn't a nationwide survey or what, it was a pretty large one, several hundred thousands of kids and stuff like that over 22 states or whatever, suddenly jumped 38% from the last 2 years. Why is that suspect is because, well, bullying's become the buzzword lately. And maybe we're seeing, you know, there's a whole bunch of hypotheses out there that I can come up with several as to why to explain that statistic off. But regardless, the statistic is there, and what you're doing with the whole child stuff, I think is the right response to bullying. Whether it's a higher statistic for whatever reason, it's the right response anyway. And focusing on every child is also the right response to that. So I'm really pleased to see that. That's just really my only comment. And that's all the schools, but especially the elementary. By the way, the elementary school bullying spikes the most. suddenly. So, there you go.
Spencer, you want to grill him?
The only thing I wanted to bring up is I think it'd be kind of interesting to possibly at the end of the year for us to bring them back and that they share at the end of the year, June or July, how they met on all these goals and what their plan is to possibly.
Spencer.
I like him.
I like him.
I do.
He's good.
Yeah.
Spencer for president.
Yeah.
He's like,
Thanks a lot.
Right.
Colin's like, leadership, huh? All right, we're gonna fix that.
Get a class change.
The comment, I thank you guys for coming and giving us just a highlight because of course you couldn't tell us everything that's going on. I appreciate what you said, Amber. It was seamless, it was quick, and I know you guys are all on board when he held this up and just kind of put you on the spot. Do you wholeheartedly believe this? And sometimes you kind of want to go, God, do I? You know, like hold on, I need to question myself. But Amber, you answered that perfectly, and I think that you guys were all in tune with that when she said that. So that was great. Thank you guys for coming and showing us.
And I just want to throw in, one of the takeaways from the conference, I remember hearing from a young man, maybe others of you did too, I can't remember the setting, from a small school that was constantly kept down because he was one of these students that could go a long way. And basically the story was a story of obstacles overcome and how he had to work to get his ability recognized so he could move on because of various rules that were keeping. Well, why not you'll get there in a couple of years. He didn't want to wait a couple of years. He wanted to learn as much as he could, go as far as he could right now. You tempt me to believe that you guys are an AWACS system looking for that person, and that when one shows up on your radar, you'll scramble. And that's why I think Spencer's idea is really superb. Hear from you again, see if it works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
Okay, because we had such a comprehensive presentation from the schools, I'm going to keep the teaching and learning report to just one item. I do want to make the board aware we will be doing some advertising, looking for some community and staff members and students to participate on a committee to look at developing some solutions to bring to the board for our, because we're growing so much and because the state has not made changes in the class size requirements and the funding implications for that, we are going to have to take a look at what that means for our elementary schools as we come to next year. We're going to have to consider different configuration or different boundary line, but we're going to need to bring a recommendation to the board on how we will address that. So we will be looking for people to participate in that process. And then finally, on the Feller update, we, as you know, have been talking to the Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding their interest in taking over the ownership and management of a portion of our Feller properties, specifically most of the trails system, just not the classroom space and the exhibit space, allowing us to maintain ownership of that part of the property so that we can continue to use it and use it in different ways for kids going forward into the future. I would like to get some input from the board on some potential, do you have any guidelines around setting up some potential dates for a community roundtable meeting to get community input on and hear from Fish and Wildlife what they're thinking, so that we can then bring that information back to the board and you can make some determinations about.
Is there a timeline that either you have in mind or they have in mind?
Well, we're thinking this winter, yeah.
Like
Okay.
January.
Sooner, better, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to get out of the holidays.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's what I have on those things.
Cool. Capital projects, anything there?
Mark has had a meeting. He has an additional meeting regarding completing plans for the stadium roof system next week after Thanksgiving, and then we'll be able to move forward on that piece and finish that up.
Okay.
And then once we have the dollars on that, we'll get out there with how we're going to do the softball field and get that piece completed as well.
Will we will have to move the old Boys and Girls Club off that property?
Actually, no, the way they're going to set it up. However, as soon as the Boys and Girls Club moves into their new site, we have agreed to partner with Mason Fire and also potentially the Sheriff's Office for them to do a
burn.
SWAT practice and then a burn down practice. So.
Okay.
So we'll kind of be moving it, but they'll be dealing with all of that for us.
And annual report on progress towards affirmative action goals.
Yeah, so we are in the process of redoing our affirmative action plan. We have looked at it every few years. We are not ready to bring it forward again, but we will in the next couple of months and ask you to look at that. Basically, our plan doesn't have a lot of major updates because there are a lot of things we're still working on. We do have, although it's typical to have goals about having female representation in the classroom, we're good there. But we have goals around minority representation. So does our staff mirror the demographics of our community? So those are the kinds of goals that you'll see in continuing in our report as we bring it forward.
Cool. All right, community linkage planning, community meetings, we do have, and we got to announce it at the end of the meeting as well, but the county joint board meeting on the 6th at the PUD building.
Yeah.
So we'll be meeting together if we all go, or even a majority of us go, before our next meeting on the 20th.
And that's the PUD down here.
In Shelton.
Yeah, the PUD in Shelton.
On Johns Prairie Road.
Oh, in Shelton.
Yeah, the big,
Oh, okay.
the big building.
What day is that again?
That's December 6th, and I don't know what's.
It's a Thursday.
It's a
It was,
Thursday.
I think, it was moved from December 4th was the original
Oh.
planned date, but at least the legislators asked that it be moved to the 6th,
So maybe they'll show up.
At what time?
Look, 6:30.
Okay.
It's that way.
It's in Shelton. I won't be able to do that.
Okay. Actually, that address would be up here.
I thought it was the Belfair
That would be
address.
this PUD
I
building,
thought
and
they
not the.
said it was like,
we
said it was in
better
Shelton.
check, but I'm pretty sure
didn't-
it's in
Yeah, because that
Shelton.
address is up here.
We'll correct that.
Okay.
I don't think they have space
I'm pretty
in
sure
there.
which where.
No.
It's
It will
that.
be,
It's
it's
big.
at Shelton.
Is it the Shelton one? Okay.
Oh, okay. Keep pointing in the wrong direction.
Sorry. All right. Upcoming board letters. You have December,
Yeah.
Who has November?
I do.
Oh.
and it'll be in tomorrow. I'm sorry. I'm late.
You know what?
This is
Denise
pretty
isn't-
typical of my schoolwork.
Denise isn't gonna be there tomorrow to receive it, so you probably have until Monday.
All right. See, love when a plan comes together.
There we go.
What would you like?
Am I in the second tier or am I going straight to third? I'm feeling a lot of stares coming at me right now from educators, and I'm
You're
starting
going to
to.
get a lot of emotional and social support.
I need it. Thanks for pointing that out, Laura.
No problem.
So what would you like as, anybody have any themes for my December letter? If I were to make something up right now, it would just be a comment on the emphasis on socio-emotional
I think that would be outstanding.
Mhm.
teaching and learning, and how it's a tough response to a significant problem. So I think I would try to link those two things. Seriousness about education, taking a socio-emotional approach for the sake of academics. But we'll see.
Okay, let's go.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
All right. Assurance of organizational performance policy monitoring reports. Our first one is ER 10, academic standards and practices. And does anybody have any? Well, first off, we need a motion to find that the superintendent.
I move that we find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER 10, academic standards and practices.
Okay, and discussion.
It's a very complete monitoring report. I appreciate that.
Yes.
I know it takes a long time to gather all that information, but it was very complete, and
With a bibliography.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. It was complete and it was also intimidating. That's what I think is good.
Thank you.
Do you have anything on it?
Well, I appreciate the way you made the motion.
Thank you, Art.
You have anything?
No.
Okay. Leanna? Okay. All those in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with ER 10?
No. The way she said it.
How did she say it again?
I said that we find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER 10 academic standards and practices.
That sure beats in compliance.
Compliant with.
There you go.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, thank you, Art. I'm really getting grilled right now. I don't like it. E3, academic achievement. I'll accept a motion to find superintendent compliant.
I move that we find the superintendent compliant with these standards we have set out for academic achievement.
Discussion.
I believe that the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the provisions of E3 and that the district is making reasonable and satisfactory progress toward achieving the desired results, given all of the work that they are doing to literally rewrite academic achievement to become student success with the three components of whole child, whole community, whole everything. So basically I approve the monitoring report and I look forward to the progress that we will be making under the new model.
Mm-hmm.
Here, here.
You have anything? Okay.
Nope.
All those in favor of finding the superintendent to have reasonably interpreted the provisions of E3 and that the district is making reasonable and satisfactory progress toward achieving the desired results, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right. Policy review. Last month we voted on ER 13 and its monitoring report. Do we have any changes that we would like to see made to that policy?
Oh, no.
Everyone good? Okay. Moving right along. Into the adjournment. Announcements or comments from the public? Okay. Comments from the board and superintendent. And I'll just throw it out, whoever has something to say.
I think I've said it before, but I was very gratified this evening to see such a convergence of the things that I've been hearing about at WASDA conferences, including this last one, and what's actually happening here. I felt I was in a position to understand what was said here, which was said very well, but I have a specific background against which to put it. And it's really interesting, and it's maybe it's not subtle, but it seems to me a way of giving emotional, child-centered learning a good name by using it and testing it as a way of actually getting people in line to learn and to teach what the world calls substance. But I think it's clear that the relationships they establish with their teacher and their peers on an academic subject is itself substance.
Brief comment is, I like this format of all the principals and assistant principals coming together at once instead of different times during different board meetings and stuff. Both for the being able to do it all at once, but also it's really great to just to see them all together and to see this cabinet, so to speak, part of the cabinet.
The power. It was the power.
Yeah, it was.
It's awesome.
And to, I could feel they work well together. I could feel.
They're a
feel
very
it,
good
right?
team.
Yeah. That's touchy-feely, but I felt it.
No, it's okay. We'll allow it. It wasn't this meeting, it was a study session. I'm really enjoying these study sessions that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I thought the discussion that we had tonight was really good. I
That's
thought
good.
the work was really
We need to start
good.
getting snacks set out, so like, because every 2 hours, it's like something to replenish.
Oh,
between
is that
yeah.
the requirement?
It's great. Kidding.
Spencer, do you have anything? All right. Self-assessment of the meeting. I guess I get to do it. And I'm going to rate our behavior on our general meeting behavior as satisfactory in all aspects. And our governance principles reviews. I think we followed our principles and our own policies. And I'm rating us overall satisfactory. Unless anyone else has a problem with that.
You did that really well. Good job.
Next meeting, our next regular meeting is December 20th here at 6:30 p.m. And also, as I said, we'll be meeting December 6th, or those of us who will be able to attend that meeting at the PUD building, specific one to be determined. So
Is this our official, like, saying we're gonna be there kind of thing, or?
no, just, I mean, if, that way it's out there that there's a potential of all 5 of us being there.
Okay.
Well, I won't be, so just.
4 of us being there.
Or.
So that may
And
not.
it is not.
There's a
a
potential of
business
3 of
meeting.
us.
It's specifically to meet with the legislators
Yeah.
to discuss our interests for the upcoming.
There's a
session.
potential multiple board members might be there. So
Well done.
with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.